Local time here, 3:30 your time, the jury did reach a verdict in the Michael Jackson case. We're waiting to hear in less than 1 hour now. We will be escorted into the courtroom. I'll be inside there. Savannah Guthrie will stay out here to give you all of the latest information, so stay with Court TV. Again, by the bottom of this hour, we should know whether Michael Jackson is innocent, not guilty, or if he's been found guilty by this jury.
Big thank you to Ann Bremner, high-profile Seattle lawyer, standing in today. Thank you, friend. I'll see you on the airwaves.
Thanks, Nancy.
As you can see, the courthouse is in Bedlam now in Santa Maria. A verdict will be announced in about an hour in the Michael Jackson child molestation case. This is a case that has raged on in evidence for over 60 days. That jury alternately looking up at the ceiling and then sitting on the edge of their seats during the evidence. One of the last things the jurors saw was a playback of the little boy accuser's videotaped statement to police that was used by the prosecution, Ron Zonen specifically, in their closing argument. Back to Diane Diamond. Diane,
what do? You don't go out and have a bikini wax someplace. So I certainly think if they toss those charges, that somewhere down the road you're going to hear jurors talking about that again. And actually, I'm not going to mention it again, Nancy. I'm going to leave that to you ladies to chat.
No,
okay, and we'll do just that, Kimberly.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting is I think if they reject those conspiracy charges, that's a rejection of the mother in this case, not the accuser.
Kimberly, take a look at this. This is Jackson's motorcade en route. That's obviously an aerial shot over Neverland. You know what, Savannah Guthrie, I don't know if you can see this out in the field, but that's got to be a heck of a feeling. You're going to hear the jury verdict in your felony child molestation verdict, and airplanes, helicopters whizzing around overhead as you are en route. You are seeing a live shot of the Michael Jackson motorcade. I recognize at this point the landscaping in the front of Neverland. Jackson headed to the courthouse. Savannah, describe the courthouse for me.
Well, can you imagine if they're still sitting at Neverland, they better hightail it here because it's about a 30-minute drive or so. So I just want to make that point. You know, the scene here suddenly, Nancy, is eerily quiet. This is the last thing I expected, but I don't hear the screaming of the fans anymore. I'm told they're very quiet now. Behind me, I think you can see there's about 50 or 60 pent-up reporters assembled there waiting for Peter Chaplin, our pool coordinator, to give him the go so that they can go in there, the ones who are lucky enough to have a courtroom pass, and I don't have to tell you that Diane Diamond is among them. Let me tell you one other thing about security. The police have really flooded this area. They're prepared for anything. They've closed off the front of the courthouse, that front street, and I'm told by our producer who's there in the thick of it that the police have zip ties on them. You know, those are those sort of plastic handcuffs. They've got those ready. Exactly, and then they have long batons. So, you know, not to lend this a more ominous tone, but the fact of the matter is this crowd can get very unruly. We've seen it. And while I heard that swell of noise right when we heard word of a verdict, right now it's weirdly quiet.
Let's take a look back if we can. There you go, the motorcade. They've got a tough satellite, everybody, but I just want you to see Jackson has not left Neverland. He's going to be late for a date with Lady Justice, Kimberly.
Yeah, he might be sporting some new jewelry if he doesn't get it together, some silver handcuffs, because he's got to get to the courthouse. Justice is not going to wait, and nor will Judge Melville. He needs to be there, and I'm shocked, Nancy, as we look at this is a live image, that they haven't left yet.
It's incredible to me. You know, everyone has been speculating that the verdict would come in at the beginning of this week, especially since Friday. The reality is, Jack Ford, this is not a good position to be in. There's no good alternative for Michael Jackson right now. He's going to face up to a verdict in a courtroom on a felony case. But he's already flirted with disaster on more than one occasion, showing up late, Jack.
But assuming he's still there at Neverland, and we don't have any reason to know definitely where he is, but I'm actually astonished, as
well,
we all are.
What do you think that big line of black SUVs is?
I've got to believe that they're ready to bring him out there, although there was some report earlier that he might have been staying in a hotel, that he might have checked out because of all the pressure at Neverland. But I have to be astonished, because if you're Tom Mesereau, especially given the early history of Michael Jackson being late, and that was just for the early stages stages of this trial. You know, the last thing you want to do is anger this judge. You know, if he's found not guilty, he walks out the door, he won't really care. But if he's found guilty and ultimately has to show up in front of this judge one more time for the most important day in his life, and that is the sentencing day, you don't want the image to be of Michael Jackson sort of ignoring the authority of the court when they said, look, I'll give you a break. I'll let you stay in Neverland for an hour, but when they knock, you better be here. You've got an hour to get here. That's plenty of time. You know, don't fool around with me
here. You know
here
what, Jack? I was
break.
always so lucky because the district attorney's office was in the courthouse. Whenever something would arise, I could literally, in my high heels, sprint to the courtroom and be there just like that. Very quickly to Savannah Guthrie, Jack brought up a really interesting point that Kimberly and I have been talking about on the set. If there is a guilty verdict, why won't there be a sentencing today? We all know what the statute says regarding sentencing on each of these counts.
It's Judge Melville's practice to set a sentencing date in the future, usually about 3 to 4 weeks. And I have to tell you, as you well know, there is a wide range of potential punishments here, of course, all, you know, depending on what they convicted on. But there is a lot of latitude for this judge. This is not one of those situations where it's a mandatory minimum, a mandatory sentence. So Judge Melville, a very careful judge, would obviously like to look at it closely, have a pre-sentence investigation done, and set that sentencing date in the event of a conviction for some time in the future.
Let's talk about the counts in this case. What is Jackson looking at? What about it, Kimberly?
Well, it depends. Now, the conspiracy charge, he could look at anywhere from 2, 3, or 4 years, depending on which aspect of the conspiracy the jury found him guilty of, if in fact they do convict. Whether it's the false imprisonment,
am I looking at Neverland?
The extortion,
Neverland?
It looks like the front gates, perhaps. So perhaps we're going to see a car speed out of there momentarily. So 2, 3, or 4 on that conspiracy charge. Then, of course, you're looking at a range of 3, 6, or 8 years with respect to the lewd act upon a child. And ordinarily, the court will select the middle term, which would be the 6 years, unless there are factors in mitigation or aggravation that could lower it or raise the standard. Then, of course, you also have the option of misdemeanor counts, Nancy, 4 of them that are lesser included offenses of the alcohol, possession of the alcohol, giving it to a minor with intent to commit a molestation. So that could also be a possibility for the jury here, and we're looking at 16 months, 2 or 3 for that.
Okay, let's talk about what is in the indictment. Laura, if we've got a graph of what the actual charges are, let's put that up. Very quickly, back out to Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, a lot of people thought that these conspiracy counts were weak from the get-go. The heart of this case is the molestation charges. That's what this case is all about. So, Savannah, you've been in the courtroom. Everybody, you are seeing a live shot of the Jackson motorcade leaving Neverland, and they do not have the pedal to the metal. They're going at about 4 mph. At that rate, he's going to miss his own verdict. Okay, back to you, Savannah. Strongest and weakest evidence regarding the molestation.
With the molestation, obviously the strongest evidence would have to be the accuser's testimony. I think it was stronger than his brother's testimony. Remember, 2 of the counts rely solely on what the brother said. 2 of the molestation counts rely solely on what the accuser said. But as this case goes, you know, what's the prosecution's best point, which would be the accuser's testimony, also happens to be the defense's weakness, because the accuser obviously had his problems on the stand. There were some inconsistencies, and his whole demeanor changed. I have to tell you, some officers here have confirmed to us what you see in those pictures, and that is that Michael Jackson is on his way. And you couldn't help but notice that scene, the fans lined up. Nancy, fans have been camped out at Neverland since this jury deliberation began 7 days ago, Friday, June 3rd. They've been waiting for this moment, obviously wanting to give Michael Jackson a strong show of support, and there are about 100 fans waiting here for when he arrives at the courthouse.
You know, it's amazing to me, everybody. We are showing you cars still coming out of Neverland. We don't know which one Jackson is in. Obviously, he's bringing the whole entourage to the courthouse. Joining me now, Court TV's Jamie Floyd. Jamie, you want to go out on a limb and give us a prediction?
You know, I got to tell you, Nancy, and I know you're going to tell me climb on out there where it's cold and rainy. This has been, in my 15 years of trying cases and then covering them, this is the hardest case for me to predict. I just don't know where they're going to come down. None of the external factors, the question from the jury, the readback, the amount of time they've deliberated, none of it gives me any insight into what's going to happen.
How about the evidence?
You know, I got to tell you, Nancy, you asked me what I think they're going to do. What I think they should do is I think they should acquit. I don't think the case was made because it was based principally on very strong, and I admit it, very strong prior bad acts as alleged by various witnesses that took the stand. But in terms of the allegations in this case, and we saw it even with the one area the jury asked about, the one readback that we understand, and of course the judge has been rather secretive about it, but the one readback we understand that they had was about the accuser. In the end, it really all hinged on that, and that's going to be a question of whether these jurors believed this accuser, and that's what we're waiting to find out. I do want to say one thing about the SUVs. They seem to have become part of the American landscape and jurisprudence. Every time there's a verdict, we're going to see a slow drive to the courthouse. So, it does bring back a lot of memories. I have to say, in all my years of covering cases, I still get very, very nervous when a verdict's coming in, just as I did when I was trying them. You get this feeling, I don't know if the rest of you feel it, but you do get this feeling in the pit of your stomach, waiting for that very important moment in the lives of everyone on both sides involved in this case.
To Jamie Floyd, you said the strongest evidence in the case was built on the testimony of the prior alleged victims. But Jamie, when you have tried child molestation cases, obviously the testimony of the young alleged victim himself, the case in chief, would be very important. What is your experience when there is no physical evidence such as tearing or semen or bruises, when you have put up a child victim or cross-examined a child victim on the stand?
Well, Section 1108 didn't exist when I practiced law in California. It doesn't exist in most
I mean the case
states.
in chief.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about, Nancy. In the case in chief, we once upon a time had to rely solely on that evidence. And you are correct. In this case, Nancy, there isn't the same kind of physical evidence that you have in many other kinds of cases. So the prosecution here really did have to rely, in part, and they are entitled to, let's be fair about it. I've been critical about this part of the law, but they are entitled to, in California, support the case in chief, the main witness, the accuser in this case, with evidence of prior alleged bad acts. There's nothing unconstitutional about it under California law. So here they supported, they corroborated, and there's a jury instruction that says that you don't have to corroborate in a sex case the accuser's
I think we've got a little breaking news with Savannah
testimony.
Guthrie. Savannah?
I just wanted to tell you that the court administrator here, Daryl Parker, has now said that the verdict will be read at 1:30-ish Pacific time, and I think that's because everybody recognizes this is a fluid situation.
Yeah, I'm looking at the situation right there. Jackson's flying along in between two mountains at about 25 mph. That's the factor we're talking about. I guess it would be when you know the defendant's on the way to the courthouse, I guess the judge will give leeway. I don't find that unusual, Kimberly, to do that when a judge knows the defendant's on the way to the courthouse.
Absolutely.
Why
and if he's doubting it, Nancy,
now?
he can turn on court TV and see a sort of very strange OJ-esque moment there, taking a look, the Ford Bronco being replaced by the Cadillac Escalade in this case.
You know, back to what Jamie and I were discussing, I was trying to get at when people say there was no evidence in this case, the reality is a young boy testified as to what happened to him. And, of course, many years ago, before DNA, lost the SUV chase, Laura. You got to get on the roof and fix the satellite, Laura, because I want to see that. I want to see the SUVs coming to court. Before there was such an exactitude in DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid proof, you did have to rely on the victim's testimony in rape and child molestation cases.
Absolutely.
Those cases always go down behind closed doors in isolated areas and trash dumps in the back seat of cars. There are no witnesses.
The idea is to get away with the crime, not to do it live on videotape, to have it used against you. And in this case, you're talking about inappropriate touching. There wouldn't be necessarily physical evidence because it's not preserved exactly at the time that the incident occurred, and depending on the extent of it. So you've got to go with his testimony, and then you've also got to go with the testimony that corroborates of his younger brother. That is evidence. That is direct evidence in a court of law. Testimony from a victim or accuser in the case and from another eyewitness. That's not even circumstantial evidence. It's direct evidence in a court of law.
Back down to Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, we are showing the viewers a live feed of the entourage. This is the only way I can put it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know there are some more SUVs headed toward the courthouse. Savannah, Melville, very unlike Melville, is giving Jackson a break here. Normally, he has told Jackson at the get-go, no more tardiness. obviously, he knows Jackson's en route to the courthouse. He's going to give him a break.
Exactly, and I've driven that road. It's not one that you necessarily want to speed down, and I think Judge Melville is satisfied by looking at pictures or hearing from his officers that Jackson's on his way and doesn't want to be unnecessarily rigid and cause some kind of accident. And so, as you say, he is giving him a little bit of a break. We see him on his way to the courthouse. I don't know that he has gotten to the point where I guess he's probably about 20 minutes away. That would be my guess from what I see there on the screen.
I almost saw a rear end right there. Hello, you're only going 25 miles an hour. Did you have to? Did you have to have a fender bender on national TV? You know, these are probably paid drivers and bodyguards. We just saw a little, what looked to be a little fender bender. Jack Ford. Okay, yeah, now I see the tail end of the Caravan. Even the word caravan, Jack Ford, brings back those memories of the Caravan of Love. Remember that, Laura? Do we have that video? Remember after the initial court appearance, Jack Ford, for Michael Jackson, he went outside and had a dance out, a dance-a-thon, a dance-off on the top of his SUV, just to celebrate life, I guess. Just came out of the courtroom. And then the Caravan of Love went to Neverland, where he hosted a cookout, I guess to celebrate his felony indictment, Jack.
It was the first of a bizarre scene. Nancy, I think we've said from the beginning that this case, in many ways, we're not trying to diminish what the accuser and his family went through, what Michael Jackson's family went through. It's almost been like a series of Saturday Night Live sketches. I mean, there's been more coming out of this for people to talk about. Nancy, let me jump back for 1 second to what you and Kimberly were talking about in terms of proving a case when you're a prosecutor without the scientific evidence. You know, my days as a prosecutor were back in the mid-'70s. I'm a little bit older than you sort of baby prosecutors there.
Thank you. I'm going to take that as
an enormous compliment. It's an enormous compliment for you ladies, and you know that. But I got to tell you something. In thinking back during the course of this trial, I don't remember winning as a prosecutor any of the cases that I prosecuted where I did not have scientific evidence and I had a young accuser accusing an adult. And it goes back to how difficult it is to win those cases. You know, nowadays jurors are expecting all of this scientific evidence, and it's almost a difficulty for prosecutors because jurors come in with expectations because of all the things they see on television and in the movies and all they read about, thinking if there's not DNA evidence that it must not have happened. But I go back to those days where it was almost impossible to win those cases as a prosecutor when you had, you know, your champion in this young victim, but that's all you had was the word of this child, and you had to put them on the witness stand. And you know, I remember one specifically where it was a relative, an uncle, who was charged with doing all of this, and I have this young girl and me basically in the courtroom, and I've got the uncle and the friends and the family saying it didn't happen, couldn't happen, here's where he was. And I remember thinking, you know what, it's just not fair that it works out that way. You know, people have pointed to those scenarios as the justification for the changes in the law in California, which, you know, you got to realize whether you disagree with some of the legalities or not, it's an enormously popular law. When you say to people in the public, should jurors in a case like this hear about previous allegations? We know, my guess is that 95 out of 100 people are going to stick up their hand and say, yeah, absolutely, let them hear about it. They can still be fair, but let them hear about it. But it's, you know what it's done? It's given the prosecutor another arrow in their quiver, if you would, in terms of having a shot at getting convictions here that, as you know, were historically terribly difficult to come by.
You want to weigh in, Jamie?
I actually agree with that. I think there's a real tension in our law between the rights of victims, and in this case still an alleged victim, but the rights of victims, which traditionally in sex crimes have been completely sublimated because of the history in our country of crimes against women and crimes against children that were underreported, let alone underprosecuted. But there's also this tension of the right to a fair trial on the part of a defendant, and maybe it's about to be resolved in this courtroom.
Straight to Savannah Guthrie. Update?
Just wanted to let you know that the entire prosecution team has now arrived. That's DA Tom Sneddon, Deputy DA Ron Zonin, who did that closing argument, Gordon Auchincloss, also central to this prosecution, and Steve Robel, the lead investigator, all now here at the courthouse waiting with all of us to hear this verdict.
Okay, the attorneys are assembling in the courtroom. Court TV is there. Diane Diamond is on row 1. Make no mistake about that. Diane has been on this case since 1993. Now her accomplice, Savannah Guthrie, manning the anchor chair outside the courthouse. Very quickly, back to Jamie Floyd. Now, Jamie, when you say victims' rights, what victims' rights are you talking about?
I'm talking about the rights of people who've been victimized as children or as women. There's been a long tradition in this country, as we know, of those kinds of cases until, as Jack says, the late 70s, 80s, with the feminist movement, and whatever you think about feminists, one of the areas they made a lot of inroads in is increasing the sunlight on the kinds of cases in which children and women are victimized. And that's how we got legislation, Nancy, let me finish. That's how we got legislation like what we have in California, 1108. It's an effort to balance the tension between the rights of victims and the rights of defendants.
Right, so the victims' rights that you were talking about, what are they?
The right to bring a case when you feel that you've been wronged, the right to have your case heard, the right to have your case prosecuted when you go to the authorities, the right to be heard as an equal member in a case and not to simply be dismissed as someone who must be making it up, which does happen, as you know, even criminal defense attorneys will admit.
Okay, all right. Well, you know, it's my understanding that already exists under the rules of the Constitution, you know, the right to cross-examine, Sixth Amendment right to face your accuser. There's always been that right to call a victim to the stand, whether the victim wanted to come to the stand or not. But we did see that evaded Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom back in the '93 case, where the victim in that case, the alleged victim, the $20 million victim, chose not to testify, and Sneddon couldn't do a thing about it.
You're right about that. He decided not to pursue the case. He did not want to go for it, but there were some complications there, which that family strongly states that the district attorney's office did not offer them the witness protection program, and that was key, in fact, for them not going forward on the case. They did not feel safe, given the amount of notoriety. Michael Jackson was even more popular back then, but now there are much more protections under the law, and prosecutors have more tools to be used. There's a lot of different victim rights advancements. I think you look at the 3 strikes laws, you look at Megan's laws, and you look at the enactment of 1108 using prior bad acts. All of those things are tools of the prosecutors to bring on behalf of victims.
Back to Jack Ford. We're going to be joined in just a moment by Vinnie Politan. Oh, hold on, Jack. Back to Savannah Guthrie in the front of the courthouse. Savannah, update. The cavalcade is actually passing a car. They're up to 45 mph now. They mean business. They're passing a pickup. Okay. Go ahead, Savannah.
Yes, and they're on the 101, which means that's the direct road right into Santa Maria, so they're getting closer slowly but surely, and I'm told the verdict will be read closer.
Slowly.
That's your words, not mine. 1:45 local time. We expect this verdict to be read. I can also tell you that in addition to the lead investigator, Steve Robel, I'm also hearing from Diane Diamond, who's still managing to report even from in there, that Lieutenant Klapakis is also here. Actually, all of the reporters are really penned up, waiting to be allowed into the courthouse to get their seats in the courtroom. There are public passes, and the way it's going to go is this. First, they'll bring the public in, the ones who have the lottery seats. Then they'll bring the press in, and then the verdict will be read. I can also tell you the crowd is growing, as you might expect, out in front of this courthouse. You've got the fans who've really been camped out there for days, if not weeks, and now you're starting to get the neighborhood, some local residents, people who are coming in. But as I said, strangely, it is very quiet. The fans are somber. They're not shouting, not yet.
Very quickly, back to Jamie Floyd. Jamie, any chance, if there is a guilty verdict on any of these counts, that there will be an appeal bond?
You know, I've heard a lot of discussion presuming that Jackson would be remanded, especially if convicted on the 2 most serious felony allegations. You know, I have to say I don't think so, Nancy, because we are talking about someone who has demonstrated some difficulty in arriving to court when he's supposed to, although we do see him making his way, as you say, slowly but surely. And we also are talking about somebody who has a lot of resources at his disposal. And frankly, I think a judge who's certainly not cutting him any favors along the way. So I think we might see Michael Jackson walk into that courthouse and, if convicted, not walk back out.
Now joining me, Vinnie Politan. Vinnie, okay, everybody's gone out on the limb. Actually, we're not alone anymore. We're all out on the limb together, giving a prediction. So Vinnie Politan, you don't have much longer, everybody. The verdict watch is almost done. We are expecting the verdict to be announced around 4:45. That's in about 20 minutes. Okay, Vinnie, last chance. Verdict?
All right, well, before I predict the verdict, I want to predict what's going to take place
starting to show up, starting just wanting to see what happens. You know, you said as you were looking at those crowds, hard to know which ones are the fans. We see a mix of them. We see the lifelong fans, the people that have been out here every day, some of them at great sacrifice to themselves, quitting jobs, moving across the country, bunking up in hotel rooms. Yes?
Savannah, we are showing, I believe, a live shot of people. People entering the courthouse. There is Mesereau.
Yes, there
and
he
his
is.
right hand, you.
Leaving the courthouse.
Oh, excuse me, are they coming out of the courthouse? Why are they coming out of the courthouse?
My guess would be to greet Michael Jackson. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I would think they'd be going into the courthouse. Oh boy, okay. I can hear everybody tuning up. The crowd is yelling. It's like a rock concert there. It's somehow lost in the sauce, Savannah, is that this is a child molestation case.
Yeah, there are moments here when you have this circus-like atmosphere, and you're right, some of the somber nature of this proceeding is lost, but, you know, this is the nature of celebrity, and there are people here who literally worship Michael Jackson. They want to be here, and as you say, we can't forget that the accuser and his family are not able to be here. They're in a witness protection program, obviously feel like it's not safe for them to come here, but you're absolutely right. There have been times during this trial when it has taken on that sort of carnival atmosphere, although I have to say, having been here from the beginning, for the most part, this was a trial that was run extremely professionally and a lot like many of the low-profile trials I have covered, believe it or not.
Everybody, we are live at the courthouse. As you see, the crowd is gathering. Jack Ford, very quickly back to you. That verdict is going to be announced, we believe, in about 9 minutes. Jack, Attorney Yu has been the right hand of Mesereau throughout. She is the one that arranges all of the presentations and does a lot of the legwork. Jack Ford, when you tried cases, were you solo or with a team?
You know what? I always did it by myself, Nancy. We talked about this before. I just was one of those people that wasn't comfortable delegating, I guess. As a prosecutor, I always tried cases by myself. As a defense attorney, even with the 5 death penalty cases I did, you know, a lot of times you see team trials going on with death penalties. I just felt more comfortable doing it myself. I felt I wanted to create whatever rapport we're going to have with the jurors. Didn't want to fracture it in any fashion. And styles, I didn't think was always the effective way to do it. So I don't think there was ever any exception. It's always been, I just tried them all by myself.
I did too. And the reality is it's you and the jury. And when that is diluted, I think you lose a little bit of your connection with the jury. Although I agree with Sneddon's decision for Zonin to give that closing argument. Here in the studio with me, Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom. Kimberly, there you see Mesereau, you, out in front of the courthouse waiting on Jackson. Right. I guess what they can't see is what we can see in the live feed. The caravan is not even close to the courthouse.
No, you're right about that. And this has been pushed back. The judge being generous, saying we'll give you an extra 15 minutes, which I think is responsible to avoid accidents. But Michael Jackson clearly on his way. Can you imagine that moments from now he will know whether or not he will be a free man or whether he could go behind bars for almost 19 years if the judge were to give him the maximum sentence and if he were to be convicted on all counts? That's what he's looking at, meaning he goes straight from that courtroom into custody unless Mesereau's got a very nifty motion filed and ready to go to request that he be out pending the sentencing.
Vinnie Politan, you went to school there in California. Can you take a look at that and tell me where are they now? That looks far away from the courthouse. That's out in a rural area in the mountains.
Well, much of Santa Maria is like that. You know, it's a very agricultural type area where you've got lots of strawberries and things like that they grow. So you're not going to see a lot of development where they are. Remember, they're hours away from Santa Barbara, which is hours away from Los Angeles. So not really, you can't really tell from that tight shot. If they pulled out a little wider, if we could get a line into that copter, tell them to pull back a little wider, maybe we could tell where they're going. But they just crossed the bridge, so, and it seems like there's a little bit more traffic now, so my guess is they're getting closer to the center of town.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. I'm in direct communication with the pilot of the copter,
Terrific.
Vinnie. Hey, wide it out, buddy. You know, the reality is, though, Vinnie, if they had even had an inclination that the verdict was coming down today, I would have thought Jackson would have been closer to the courthouse.
Well, I think he wanted to spend his last few moments, if these are in fact his last few moments on the outside, you know, in his home, in Neverland. And I just can't imagine what that moment must have been like when someone had to go knock on his door and say, Mr. Jackson, they've reached a verdict, it's time to go. I mean, how difficult was that to deliver the news? And number two, how difficult was it then for Michael Jackson to get ready to get into that SUV?
Believe me, he's not the first person on trial for a felony. Okay?
Right,
we keep acting like Michael Jackson is some kind of hothouse flower. And if you say, hey, there's a verdict, he's going to pass out on the floor. I think he's a lot tougher than you're giving him credit for, Vinnie Politan.
Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But the bottom line is this is a guy who's been free and really been on top of the world since he was a youngster. I mean, people have loved him since he was 6, 7 years old. And now at this point, there might be 12 people who don't think much of him. And that's got to be difficult for Michael Jackson to get up and get into that SUV and then ultimately make that walk from the SUV into the courthouse.
Very quickly, back to Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsome. Kimberly, a California lawyer during her trial days. Kimberly, I say no way appeal bond. What I mean by that is if there is a guilty verdict on any of these counts, that this judge will let Jackson go back to Neverland. Why? Flight risk. That's my take.
Yeah, not a shot. This is a guy who's known to be kind of a master of disguises. He has access to private planes, although the judge has taken his passport. This is not a case where he should be treated any differently than anyone else that goes forward before the court, except for the circumstances he has to be able to flee or get away from the jurisdiction.
Straight back to Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, update.
Our producer, who's out there in the thick of it with the fans, says the Santa Maria Police Department has estimated to her that this crowd will reach 1,000 people before this day is out.
Okay, you know what, Savannah, when you were saying 100 to 200, we kind of had an aerial view, a little bit pulled back, and it looked like it was already well over 100 to 200 people there at the courthouse. Fast. And you know what? They've been a tiny bit angry, Savannah, throughout this trial. Describe the scene there. Is it calmed down now that the cops are there?
It is. That's what I'm being told, is that the fans, for the most part, are pretty calm right now. Even when Tom Mesereau walked out, there was a little bit of a swell of chanting and that kind of thing, and then it immediately died down. I mean, honestly, it sounds like the fans are feeling the tension and feeling their own nerves as they listen, because this is not a quiet bunch. They're not afraid to let you know how they feel. And throughout the course of this trial, when Tom Mesereau's shock of white hair would pass by, they would start chanting, "Let's go defense," as though it were a football game. And we didn't hear any of that. Usually I could hear it pretty well. I didn't hear any of that kind of chanting. So it seems to me it's the calm before the storm. A lot of people are praying, huddled together, very tense as they wait for their favorite person, Michael Jackson, to come into this courthouse, and wondering whether or not they'll watch him walk out this afternoon.
Everybody, update. The verdict form we've all been looking at is posted on the Court TV website if you want to look at it along with us. We are live at the Santa Maria Courthouse. There has been a verdict in the Michael Jackson child molestation case. We are waiting for the jury to read it out loud in the courtroom. It's supposed to be read in 1 minute and 40 seconds. Guess what? I think we're late. Back to Savannah Guthrie.
The motorcade is now on city streets here in Santa Maria. That means it is literally minutes away.
We are seeing, I guess, an ultraviolet shot of that. We've got helicopters hovering over the motorcade, and as you see, one of many times, Mesereau and you at the forefront, waiting for their client to show up. Jamie, how many times has Mesereau paced that concrete going, "Hello, Michael Jackson, come to the courthouse, where are you?"
Well, it took him so long to get out of Neverland, I started thinking the story might be shifting to whether or not he was on his way at all. But, you know, I think you're right. The judge is going to cut him a little slack. The jury has the right to have Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson has the right to be present when this verdict is read. And, you know, after all this hard work and effort, they're not going to blow it over a few minutes. And like you said, he started to put the pedal to the metal, so he'll be there soon, as Savannah reported.
There you see everyone lining up. I believe, Savannah, you mentioned the prosecution is already in the courtroom sitting at their state's table, correct?
Well, they're in the courthouse. I don't know that they're in the courtroom yet. My report was that at 1:25 local time that the entire prosecution...
They're just going in right now, Savannah. You're right. We just showed a shot. Yeah. So they were in the courthouse and are now going and sitting at council table. Man, Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom, that's a tough time when you're sitting there. I can remember times when the bailiff would hand me the verdict and I would stand there thinking, thank God the jury cannot see my knees shaking, because I could actually feel them shaking when you start turning those pages and reading those counts one after the next. In my old jurisdiction, they'd mark it on each count, so you'd have to go through every single page to get through all the counts, Kimmy.
Absolutely, and I'm just getting a vicious flashback of my last high-profile case where I sat there. You're just sweating and shaking and just hoping that it's going to work out. I never had to read a verdict. It was always done by the court clerks in my jurisdictions, but that is really a moment of reckoning in the courtroom for all sides, and especially here, of course, for Michael Jackson. And let's not forget, Nancy, also good to remember the victims and the accusers in this state, in this case, that they are probably at home watching, maybe watching us right now, to see and learn whether or not a jury believed them when they said they told the truth.
We are waiting for the Jackson verdict to be read. There you see the motorcade making its way to the courthouse. They're getting close, but as of yet, no cigar. They're now officially late again. To Vinnie Politan, I don't expect a reprimand from the judge. They're stuck in traffic. Yeah, not at this point. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of traffic, but, you know, they got a late start. And, you know, everyone got word that there was a verdict. Apparently, Michael Jackson took him a while to get ready to get into that SUV. But they'll be there, and they're going to make this announcement. So much has been invested, so much time and effort, that at this point, I don't see the judge doing anything because he's 5 minutes late. Yeah, I agree. Joining me now, Catherine Cryer. Catherine, want to go out on a ledge with us and make a prediction?
Yeah, I'll join you. I absolutely think they're going to convict on child molestation. One or more of those counts. I think the conspiracy is going to go out the window. Again, that's pure speculation on my part, but if I had to bet, that's what I'd do.
You know, I'm thinking that they had a good idea or a majority on Friday, because when they get in on Monday, they have one question, they withdraw it, Catherine, before the lawyers can even agree on an answer. I think they had reached it, and whatever holdouts there were convinced to join the majority.
Yeah, over the last week, I said Monday, Tuesday was my prediction for the verdict. It didn't surprise me at all that they didn't come back Friday. This is, you know, a very weighty decision they have, and to sleep on it over the weekend didn't surprise me at all. But boy, you're right. They were ready to go when they returned today.
Savannah Guthrie, in this jurisdiction, will they go ahead if there is a conviction and fingerprint Jackson right there in the courtroom? Will they handcuff him in the courtroom? Will he be allowed to meet with his family, his attorneys before he goes away?
You know, all good questions, and to be honest, Nancy, I don't know what Judge Melvin's practice would be. I mean, I think a lot of it depends, of course, on whether or not they would take him right into custody or not in the event of a conviction. And I can tell you that Michael Jackson is 2 minutes or less. Actually, I think he's just pulling into the courthouse right now, and I can hear the crowd really start to roar for Michael Jackson as he arrives here.
Vinnie Politan, as we wait for Michael Jackson to enter the courthouse, his SUV has just driven up. If there are multiple convictions, the judge could run all sentences concurrent or at the same time.
He could, and I think it depends what counts they come back with. It's amazing here watching this scene. I mean, so much emotion now for the Jackson family, because Michael Jackson, really, think about it, for the last 20 years, even though he's not the oldest, he's the leader of this family. He was the icon of the Jackson family, and at this moment now, all his brothers and sisters and his parents all there to support him as he walks into that courthouse.
You know, Jamie, he looks so frail. This is the first time I think I've ever seen Michael Jackson wearing a tie.
And no vest, Nancy.
I think that's one of Jack Ford's ties.
I didn't think, and it's always easy to do a little analysis when you're actually seeing it, I didn't think he'd have the spring in his step that Vinnie thought he might. I'm amazed he made it this far. In fact, I had said all along we'd never get to a verdict because I wasn't sure that we'd get through the trial without Michael Jackson falling apart completely. But here he is, and as frail as he looks, the judge is going to have him stand. Would that we had a camera in there to see the man stand for his verdict.
He did wave to the camera, though, Jamie. I mean, to the fans.
Well, you were right on that, I guess.
This is a live shot of Michael Jackson entering the courtroom. This is a day that will go down in legal history regardless of the outcome, be it guilty, not guilty, or split verdict, flanked by his family, his mom, his dad, his lawyer, many of his siblings. We see LaToya, Janet, Jermaine. The whole family is rallying today en masse around Michael Jackson. Savannah, the crowd basically went wild. Uh-oh, there goes the metal detector. Go ahead, Savannah.
Absolutely. I mean, if I hadn't seen it, I would have heard it because the fan just roared when Michael Jackson pulled up. And now I'm just starting to see people line these streets as they come here waiting to hear this verdict first as it goes out on a live audio feed from that courtroom just a few minutes from now. What Michael Jackson did was turn to the right as he does every day when he comes here to court. There's a little waiting room he can go into, use the bathroom before he comes in through that metal detector and sits at the defense counsel table waiting to hear this jury speak.
Kimberly, we see the entire family coming to support Michael Jackson at this time, the most crucial point during the trial. We're expecting the verdict to be read at any moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the family was there, especially the sisters, at a couple key points, but one would have perhaps expected they would have been there more. But it's interesting, if you look past in the past, you've seen that LaToya and Janet have made comments and suggestions about Michael Jackson and his relationships with children that aren't so favorable. So perhaps also that's why we didn't see a lot of the celebrities come forward that were supposed to.
Specifically what?
Well, LaToya thought that he had inappropriate kind of relationship with young kids, has said that in national television interviews. Janet Jackson has also said things, and it's interesting if you wonder if other people also shied away because perhaps they knew things and didn't want to be a part of this.
We just saw Michael Jackson's mother, Catherine, go into the courtroom. She was the lady with the dark hair wearing the white pantsuit. That is his father, Joe Jackson, on whom he has blamed many of his current day emotional upsets, having been driven as a child star to perform. There you see his sister. That is LaToya. I think I saw Janet Jackson, also a megastar in her own right, out from under the Michael Jackson shadow, all supporting Michael Jackson. And still, Catherine, no sign of the victim's family, the alleged victim's family. Surprised?
Not necessarily. You know, this is going to be obviously very dramatic. It may be the kind of thing where they don't want the accuser possibly at any risk. Obviously, security is out there in force amount, but I don't know that I would have him in or around the courtroom at this time.
I agree. Not unusual after a long trial for the victim, the alleged victim, not to show up. This is a shot of Michael Jackson entering the courtroom. Michael Jackson dressed unlike any other day for court. He looks like he is breaking down in tears. No spring to his step whatsoever. Right there in that shot, as he turned around, his face said it all. There you go, more members of the Jackson entourage going into the courtroom. Kimberly?
Yes, you know, I just can't tell you how struck I was just by seeing Michael Jackson's face. Almost looked as if he was contorted with emotion, and I don't blame him. This is a very difficult situation. He has been under enormous pressure and strain, and it's just moments away where he's going to hear what the rest of his future holds, Nancy.
Here is Tito Jackson, another of the Jackson family members, going into the courtroom. The verdict was scheduled to be announced at 4:30 sharp, then 4:45 sharp, but as everyone is making best efforts to get in there, the judge has taken no official action, and you can see the overwhelming presence of the bailiffs in the courtroom. Jack Ford, not unusual at all. There's the court spokesperson. Also not unusual at all for heavy bailiff presence, Jack.
Not at all, and certainly given the nature of this case, Nancy, you know what we've said from the beginning, that sometimes the best way to handle problems is make sure they don't happen at all, and the way you do that is by a real visible presence. If I can add one thing, Nancy, to what you and Kimberly were talking before, and that was whether there was any real potential for bail pending appeal for him if he is in fact convicted here. And you mentioned the one aspect that the court has to determine, that is whether he's a danger to flee or whether he's a danger to somebody else. But as you know, there's that second aspect where a judge or a court has to say, are there genuine issues on appeal here that could indeed end up reversing this thing? And I think you have to realistically say, at least if Judge Melville is making that first call, it's really unusual for a trial judge to basically stand up and say, yeah, you know what, I messed up. I made a couple of bad rulings here that could have an impact on this, so I'm going to give you bail pending appeal so you can take this up and have an appellate court say I was wrong. The reality is, rarely do the trial level judges ever give that. And in a case like this, where most people agree the big appellate issue would probably have something to do with the admission of the prior bad acts, well, as we know, the law in California is very, very clear about that, and the judge followed that law in California. So my guess would be all the way down the line, you would not get either the trial level judge or an appellate court.
Foreperson number 80.
Chaotic, or is everybody?
Find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80.
That completes the reading of the verdicts. I am now going to go off the air.
All right, you heard it, 1 through 10, including the lessers, not guilty across the board. Let's go right out to Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, we've been seeing white doves being released. Tell us what else is going on.
Well, an absolute rush, a roar from the crowd with every not guilty count. It was read 14 times, those words, not guilty, for Michael Jackson, and the crowd went crazy as this jury completely rejects the prosecution's case against Michael Jackson.
Now, that's pretty amazing stuff. Obviously, we all sort of went out on our limbs, various limbs, and made predictions. I will say, Jack, I was talking about this last week. Until the rebuttal video came on, I was really on the fence. I really was uncomfortable with the state's case. The rebuttal video, I thought, was pretty strong stuff.
I thought the same thing you did. I thought going into this, what gave the state the strongest component of their case was the prior acts. Then they got beat up, as usually. I mean, it's an ebb and flow to a trial, as you know. I think they got hurt during the course of the cross-examination and the defense presentation, but then when the video came in, it sounded like it was powerful.
All right, Savannah, give us some more information about the turn of events out there.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little color from inside the courtroom, and I can tell you Diane Diamond's on her way. But Susan Yu, who is Tom Mesereau's right-hand woman, and he wouldn't try a case without her, I'm told, was crying as these verdicts were read. Tom Mesereau emotionless. I have not been given word yet on what Michael Jackson's reaction to this clean sweep from the jury was.
Well, I think we can probably guess just a bit of that sort of reaction. What sort of behavior there in the crowd? I assume everyone. You've got the cheer, they've got the verdict that most of those people out there were searching for. Sort of chaotic, or is everybody seemingly pretty well behaved at this point?
They're celebrating, and they seem to be well behaved. I don't see a rush of fans, running around or anything. I think everybody's a little bit in stunned shock here as these verdicts were read out. But as I say, as each of the not guilty verdicts were read, you could hear the crowd just start cheering and cheering. It's not just fans that are here, by the way. A lot of local residents started to pour in here as soon as we got that hour mark that the verdict was going to be coming in. People are now running, they're waving signs, you hear cheers. But it's not that crazy riotous circus atmosphere that some of us thought might take place here in the event of a guilty verdict.
And what about the reaction, members of the community coming to the trial? It's one thing for the fans who've accumulated, but what sort of reaction have you been getting watching members of the community in and out during the course of this trial, and certainly here at the conclusion?
Well, people in this community have sort of, in a way, been tuning out this case, believe it or not. We hang on every single development, but the people of Santa Maria really don't. Although you would find when you talk to people that people liked Michael Jackson. They liked having them as their neighbor. I have to say, I've just gotten a note that Michael was seen in the courtroom just dabbing his eyes, and that at that point, Tom Mesereau, his defense attorney, tapped him on the shoulder. At Susan Yu continuing to cry as everyone else in that courtroom seems to be pretty much emotionless.
All right, Nancy, I know you're going to have to run, but before you do, your reaction.
Well, I'm having a crow sandwich right now. It doesn't taste very good, but you know what? I'm also not surprised. I thought that celebrity is such a big factor. When you think you know somebody, when you have watched their concerts, listened to their records, read the lyrics, believed they were coming from somebody's heart, Jackson is very charismatic, although he never took the stand. That has an effect on this jury. I'm not going to throw a stone at the mom, although I think she was the weak link in the state's case. But the reality is, I'm not surprised. I thought that the jury would vote in favor of the similar transaction witness. Apparently, the defense overwhelmed them with the cross-exam of the mother. I think it boils down to that, plain and simple. All right, thank you very much. So, Savannah, do we know yet the substance of the readbacks? We know, we assume it was about the accuser's testimony, but I'm wondering in particular if there was elements of the cross-examination that they reheard, things that might have solidified the agreement for a unanimous not guilty verdict.
We don't know, and in fact the court, in a nod to the media, did finally this morning say yes, there had been a readback on Friday, but didn't say who it was from. Our best sources told us it was the accuser's testimony, but it was our sense of it that it was sort of a wholesale readback, and that at any point the jury was able to say, no, we don't need to hear anymore. But we were not told that they had requested any particular portion of the accuser's testimony, which of course made it a lot harder for us to speculate as to what was in their minds. But we all know what was in their minds now.
Absolutely. And Savannah, any arrangements, any prior information about press conferences, whether or not the members of the jury might speak, these sorts of things?
Well, here's how it's going to go down. The DA, Tom Sneddon, has said he would speak no matter what, and it's his press conference that would go first. It will take place in a few minutes, and then the defense will speak. It was our understanding there were plans, and there may still be plans, that Michael Jackson and his family would attend that news conference, that Michael Jackson may have something to say at that news conference in addition to his attorneys. And the jurors certainly will be given an opportunity to speak. Arrangements have been made for a place for them to speak, a news conference, a thing that could be held live, where reporters could come and attend, but we're not told yet whether or not any of the jurors have taken us up on their offer. Now I've just been handed a note that Peter Chaplin, our pool coordinator, says the jurors are ready to talk to the media. They will talk to the media, but it's going to be at a different site than right here at the courthouse.
Well, that's fascinating. Do we have an idea when? You say different site. Are they going to be transported someplace?
They will be. I mean, that's our latest information, is that it would be somewhere that they would be transported to. There had been plans initially to have them do it here at the courthouse, but for whatever reason that changed. But the order of events as planned, and we all know how the plans go out the window in a fluid situation like this, was for the DA to go first, then the defense, then the jurors. That's still the plan. Okay, that's been handed a note, and the jurors will speak. That's the plan.
All right, please interrupt Savannah if you get any more information, because we're going to go around now and get some comments. Vinny, it'll be interesting if the jurors do speak, whether or not we get that distinction between not guilty and innocent, whether or not they will tell us, you know, there may have been a vote, but the DA just couldn't prove there was fire.
Yeah, and this case points out again how difficult it is to be a prosecutor. You've got that burden of proof, Catherine, beyond a reasonable doubt. And you're looking on the outside, oh, well, they got the evidence, but that is such a burden. And in a case like this where credibility became an issue, I guess it became too much.
And it's all, well, let me go out to Jamie, because Jamie, you're the one that certainly has no egg, because you said this should be a not guilty based upon the evidence, and certainly the jury agreed with you. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I got to say I don't feel great woe for prosecutors. They do have the burden, but they also have all the resources of the government on their side. And as Savannah and Diane have reported, Mr. Mesereau made much of that, referring always to Mr. Sneddon as the prosecutor for the government.
Savannah?
Catherine, I just wanted to tell you that the jurors have now filed out of the courtroom. I am told that the jurors will participate in a news conference, that it will take place here at the courthouse. I'm told that Michael Jackson was virtually expressionless. This was the site from the overflow room where many reporters had to listen to this verdict. It says that as the verdicts were read, our producer saw him fold his hands in front of his face, almost as he was resting his chin on them with the elbows on the table. We were not able to see the prosecutors because the view from that room did not include the prosecution table. It was zoomed in on Michael Jackson, hoping to record any expression. And as I say, we do expect Diane Dimond from that courtroom as soon as the judge opens the doors and lets the public out.
All right, Kimberly, your thoughts?
Well, you know, nothing surprises me in this case. I think a lot of people expected that Michael Jackson would be acquitted in this case. I think for people in the business that have spent years trying cases like this, child abuse, sexual molestation cases, you can kind of see through the lines of what really goes on when you're dealing with criminals, etc. However, I think this is, I'm sorry to say, another kind of example of not guilty by reason of celebrity. From the beginning of the case, I said it over and over, wrong family, right charges. I thought the 1108 evidence was very compelling. This accuser's case, not so much.
All right, Savannah, did I hear you?
Yes, you did. Sorry to interrupt. This is my day to interrupt. Catherine, I'm just told that Michael Jackson hugged his attorneys after the judge and the jury left the courtroom, as they now have. And that live picture you see on your screen, of course, is the public as they file out of that courtroom. We do expect to hear from the jurors, perhaps momentarily. The DA has indicated he will speak. And, of course, I expect the defense to speak, including perhaps Michael Jackson himself.
All right. And, of course, you're pointing out that people are filing out of the courtroom. So, of course, Diane Dimond will be joining us in just a moment. Jack, were you surprised that none of the lesser counts, the alcohol, delinquency sort of counts, none of those panned out?
You know, given what the first set of verdicts were, you can see Michael Jackson out walking out. And interesting, Catherine, the same expression he had walking in.
Yep.
He had that bemused expression when he was walking in before the verdict was returned. I don't know that I've ever seen a criminal defendant in a case so profound for him that could have had such a dramatic impact on his life remain as expressionless.
Well, I'll tell you, my gut reaction is medication.
And it's probably true.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. But going back to your question, as we watch him walking out now, I think once they said not guilty to the first grouping, right. You and I and Vinny are sitting right here together, and I think we all sort of looked at each other and said, that's it. They're going to cross the board with not guilties. Obviously, took him a week to wrestle with all these things. As you said, we don't know. Go ahead, Savannah, I'm sorry.
That's Michael coming out, and let me tell you, the crowd is going wild as he walks out of this courthouse, a free man, fully vindicated by this jury in Santa Maria.
Well, it looks like he's heading to the SUV. Do we anticipate that any sort of press conference by the defense team may take place at Neverland?
Well, that wasn't the plan, Catherine. The plan was for a defense courtroom appearance in another courtroom in this building, and that Michael Jackson would be in attendance in the case of an acquittal, which clearly this is. But as we say, it's a fluid situation. Who knows what Michael Jackson has decided now, now that this nightmare for him is over.
And Jack, you made an interesting point.
Well, as I said, if we know that he's been on various medications throughout the course of this trial, and if he is indeed still on them, if I'm his lawyer and I'm his doctor, I'm saying, no, Michael, it's not the time for you to talk right now. I'll talk as your lawyer. You can talk another time if you want to, but now's not the time.
Absolutely.
Catherine, the attorneys still plan to speak. Not sure about Michael Jackson. You see him leaving there, but the attorneys certainly are still planning to address the media.
Yeah, well, in looking at him, I would probably say let's go home and you can issue a statement at a later time. Vinny, were you surprised about the lesser counts? Because there was a lot of pretty uncontroverted about passing around Jesus juice. And
it might be a case where they just said, you know, goes to the credibility of the entire case. We don't believe this. We don't believe anything.
Catherine?
But go ahead, Savannah.
I'm sorry, but I have something. Judge Melville read a note from the jury after this, and this is mostly what it says. This is not a verbatim. We, the jury, feeling the weight of the world's eyes upon us all, thoroughly and meticulously studied the evidence. We competently came to our verdict. We respectfully request the world allow us to return to our private lives as anonymously as we came in.
Bless their hearts. Well, we'll see. Of course, we've got one juror that is apparently writing her book, so I don't know how anonymous some of these people actually want to be. What about the arrangements then? We see Mesereau stayed behind as the SUVs are leaving, so we still anticipate that he may respond after Sneddon. Do we know what the arrangements are for the DA, Savannah?
The DA is supposed to go first. There's a place where a news conference has been arranged. He's supposed to come down with the entire prosecution team and also the police officers, the sheriff's investigators who did so much to investigate this case. Thereafter, the plan was to have the defense go, and then if the jury wished to speak, have the jurors speak. As I said, initially it had been planned to be on an off-campus location. Now I'm told it will happen here in this courthouse, so we'll just have to wait and see. And of course, all of this could be up in the air now that we actually have the verdict. Things tend to change once you've actually heard the jury speak.
Absolutely. Jamie, what do you think about civil suits? Because we certainly saw O.J. Simpson acquitted in the criminal court and convicted in the civil court, if you will.
Well, of course, this family has said they will not bring a civil suit. We'll have to see if they are true to that word. There's also, you know, the possibility that at that time they meant it and maybe they changed their mind. But, Catherine, I cannot let this verdict go down as if it is all because of Michael Jackson's celebrity. This was a very, very hard case to call. I think all of us found it to be one of the most difficult cases to call, even with the facts presented and even with the particular biases we each bring to the table. But when a case is hard to call, it comes down to reasonable doubt. It boils down to giving the presumption of innocence to the defendant, and this is a case where our system has been vindicated. Not so much Michael Jackson, but our system. The jury did what it was supposed to do.
Well, you're absolutely right on that, because when I did a bunch of radio interviews during the course of this case, and I kept saying, I'm going to wait till the last witness and the last moment of argument, because I can't get there. And until that rebuttal video came in, where the accuser was actually being interviewed by the cops in July, I couldn't resolve it in my own mind. So you're absolutely right. If we're still there at the end of the case, then the system is supposed to end up with an acquittal. What about, Jack, the notion of Jackson going after Sneddon? You know, some people have said he would try sort of the malicious prosecution. At this point, would you say, look, I'm taking my victory, I'm going home?
There are a couple of things play into this. If I'm his lawyer, I say to him, you know what, pack it up, thank these jurors, go home, try to put together the pieces of your lives, do things a little differently than you've done in the past. Because, as you know, also the legalities of trying to sue a prosecutor are very, very difficult. You know, there's what they call sovereign immunity for governmental officials acting within their governmental capacity. And this is a case where charges were established. A judge said that's fine, we'll go to trial with him. The judge let the case go to the jury to determine whether he was guilty or not. So this is not something where a judge just threw it out saying, this is nonsense, you prosecutors have never should have brought this in the first place. So I suspect a lot of that was talk based on some anger. Now that the jury has come back and said not guilty, my suspicion is he'll go home and try and focus on picking up the pieces of his life. And certainly if I'm his lawyer, I tell him that's what you should be doing. You don't want to set foot in another courtroom again. Absolutely.
Well, Diane has joined us now. Diane, take us through the moments.
Yeah, boy, Catherine, you can see I've just come out of the courtroom now. Let me take you through it. Michael Jackson was supposed to be there about 1:30, and he didn't get into the courtroom until about 1:51. The moment he came down the aisle, I looked up at him, and I never saw such an anxious face on any defendant in my life. He had his fists clenched, and he walked right to the defendant chair, sat right down, no lingering at all. With him, Rebe, his oldest sister, LaToya, Randy Jackson in the front row, in the next row behind them, his mother, father, and his brother Tito. And Tito had a soothing arm around his mother most of the time. I was in a series of rows where the media was, and the fans were directly behind me. And as we waited for the jury to come in, we noticed that the alternate jurors were in the two front rows, one on the right and one on the left, and they were just as anxious as we were. It took quite a while for the judge to open up all of the verdict forms. He, of course, had 10 of them, plus the lesser included. It took at least 6 minutes, and as we all sat in that courtroom, the jury, the alternates, and all the rest, you could have heard a pin drop. I couldn't help but notice when the jury came in, Catherine, they did not look at Michael Jackson, and you know that usually portends pretty poorly for a defendant. There were some women in the jury who were sobbing as we waited for the judge to open those verdict forms. They were all dressed very casually. I think that none of them are going to talk to the media, hence their casual clothes. The foreman stood up and identified himself after all the jury forms were opened up by the judge and placed in a pile. He gave the forms to Lorna Fry, his Superior Court clerk, and she began to read, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty on all of the 10 counts, including the 4 lesser counts on the alcohol charges. Again, you could have heard a pin drop until the guilties, not guilties, started to rack up, and then the fans began to openly sob behind me. We had all been admonished to be very quiet, and they were trying to stifle their sobs, but you could hear them gasping for breath as they listened to not guilty after not guilty be read out. I kept watching the jury, Catherine, and I'll tell you, juror number 8, this is the woman whose 2 nieces were molested and her sister was raped at the age of 12. Her cheeks were flushed and she began to weep openly. She even asked the bailiff for more Kleenex at one point. The Asian woman sitting next to her, juror number 9, was crying almost as much, but she kept her head down to the floor. The woman next to her, who once worked at the Rancho supermarket, she just kept her head down, as did the man in the wheelchair. It was as if they all looked so sad. And I guess after 14 weeks of going through something like this, holding another person's fate in your hands, it would have to have an effect on you. Even the men seemed very somber and very solemn. And again, after it was all over, they got up, they walked out, and not one of them looked back at Michael Jackson. The alternates were also led in the back. I should tell you one more thing. The judge read a statement from the jury that they had prepared, and he read it very quickly, so I didn't get it all down, but here's the gist of it. We, feeling the weight of the world and the world's eyes upon us, want the world to know that we met and we studied the evidence. We competently came to our conclusion. We hope this case is a testament to the judicial system in America. We respectfully request that the world allow us to return to our lives as anonymously as we came. And then the judge released them with the, the official release statement saying, if you want to talk to someone, you can. The counsels on both sides may want to talk to you. The media may want to talk to you. And then he stopped dead and he said, may want to talk to you? I think they do, but a member of the media, a representative will come back and talk to you if you would like to talk at a news conference. I'm not hopeful that any of them will want to talk, Catherine.
All right, tell me about specific reactions. Tell me about Mesereau, Sneddon, Michael Jackson as the verdicts were read.
Well, Michael Jackson, again, just sat robotically still. There was no movement of his head. And, of course, we're sitting behind him, so we couldn't see his face. But after it was over and the jury filed out, he leaned over to Mr. Sanger, one of his defense attorneys, and got a big hug. Mesereau was patting him on the back. Then he turned to Mesereau. They had a big embrace. I noticed that Susan Yu, the third defense counsel, was openly weeping at the defense table. And then we, the media, we were ushered out before the public and before his family. I got to stay in the lobby just for a little bit, and I noticed that one of the brothers that did not get in was Jermaine, and he was waiting for him at the, as you come right through the magnetometer, the metal detector there, and he gave his brother a big old hug, and then they all just, all the security guards of Jackson's joined hands like this, formed a ring, they went right to the cars and completely dashed out.
All right, what about Sneddon?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get to him, did I? Somber, very somber. This was a unanimous decision, not guilty on every single charge. It had to have been a blow to Mr. Sneddon and his team. You know, they raided Neverland back in November 2003. They've been working together to put a case together ever since. District Attorney investigators, members of the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, two of the detectives, lead detective Steve Robel and his lieutenant Jeff Klipakis, they both lost their fathers during this. It was very tough on them, but they were back in court working overtime. And this has to be a devastating blow for them. They did not get one guilty, not even a misdemeanor lesser alcohol charge.
Well, this is really Sneddon's swan song, isn't it?
Well, he has already announced that he is going to retire, so I think the retirement comes up in 16 or 18 months from now. And no matter what he's done in 34 years, Catherine, you know, he in 34 years has tried, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of cases. He's only lost 4. Now he's lost 5, and this will be the one, I'm afraid, will be his legacy.
And any idea where the accuser's mother is at this time?
Well, you know, they're in the state witness protection program, and they live down in the Los Angeles area. There was no time for them to come the 4 hours up in this direction. So I know that they're not here. I'm sure that they are just as stunned and just as devastated as the prosecution team.
How long do you think it's going to take for Sneddon to get out there and conduct a press conference?
Well, they're supposed to do it right away. I'm sorry, I can't see the monitor from here, but there is a room set aside for not only the state. They wanted to go first, win or lose, I was told, and then the defense will go there 40 minutes after we leave the courtroom, so now probably 35 minutes, the jury will be allowed to come into the courtroom, the very courtroom where they sat for 14 weeks, and speak to the media if they so choose. I've come in here, so I don't know if any of them are planning to do that, or you know, there are buses over here where they can get on, go back to their automobiles, which are at an undisclosed location not far from here, and simply, as they said in their statement, go home anonymously, and please, everybody respect that.
All right, Jamie, what do you think about the jurors' reaction at the time the verdict was read, their reaction to Jackson not looking at him, the crying? It didn't seem a joyful response on the part of the jury. You know, we've done the right thing. We're here for Michael. It seemed much more toned down, and I wonder whether that's a reflection on the fact that these people may have thought there was something here, but we just couldn't find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, you know, some of them may have, Catherine. Others may have found less here. In the end, they may not be as unanimous in their degree of their verdict as we see with the unanimity of its presentation. That's why I really do hope they'll talk. I remember in the Blake case, I found it so illuminating to hear the jurors explain that verdict. Now, of course, we respect their anonymity, and if they choose not to speak, no one would respect that more than I, but it's so valuable to hear what went on in that jury room to the extent they want to share that with us, because otherwise we're left to speculate, why was this one sobbing? Why weren't they looking at Mr. Jackson? You know, I've had cases, Catherine, where the jury won't look at me, and I've had a successful result, and then I've had cases where I thought we'd had it wrapped up. I even had one juror smile at me, and I learned later from the juror that she had it in for my client from the day I walked into the courtroom. So you can't always glean what's going to happen. You really have to hear from the jurors. I do hope they'll take the opportunity to share with us, at least one or two of them, what their thinking was.
Yeah. Although, Jack, it could be very interesting if they were to come out and say there were things that we believed. I mean, it would be commenting on Michael Jackson, even if he didn't get convicted, that these people absolutely thought there was something there to the case. And
a couple of things I think are important. One is to remember that, according to both Diane and Savannah, throughout the course of this trial, they didn't look at Michael Jackson. And we had sort of, everybody speculated as to why not. I mean, here's this big celebrity in their midst, but they always mentioned, it was very curious to all of the courtroom observers, that they developed no relationship with him, didn't look at him, even in the most compelling moments of the testimony. Diane and Savannah said they did not look at him. They may have simply been continuing that pattern here. It may well be
eyes ahead for him.
It's very clear, Catherine. He has dodged a major bullet here in this court. 10 possible felony counts, not guilty on every single count. But you're right, already his finances are said to be, this is a quote from the prosecution team, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. $300 to $350 million in debt, facing the real reality that he may have to sell the Beatles catalog only to satisfy the loans on the Beatles catalog. There's a lien against Neverland. There's a lien against his own private music catalog called the MyJack catalog. Has not only his music but lots of other entertainers' music in it. This is the next big hurdle for Michael Jackson. Now what becomes of his life? The last 3 weeks of this trial, a man named Frank DeLeo was with him. He is a man, very interesting man, actually. He was Michael Jackson's business manager back during the Bad tour and the Dangerous days, the Thriller days, some say the apex of his career. And he has been here, he has told people, because, quote, when the acquittal comes, I'm here to get the next concert tour ready, not only for Michael, but for all of his brothers. And the word is that to raise money, they are going to go on a nationwide, if not worldwide, concert tour. But, you know, Catherine, when you look at him and the way he came into court today, the way he walked out of court, he still looked dazed, over-medicated, very thin, very frail. I just don't know how in the world he is going to put on a concert like he used to put on. And not that he can't sing anymore, but, you know, I think it'll be a very, very difficult comeback.
Well, and we keep thinking of Michael Jackson in his heyday. He is 46 years old. That's not old. That is not old by any stretch of the imagination. But in fact, although it was quite interesting in talking last week, we had several people on saying, as far as an international tour, he, you know, guilty or not, you know, this is a guy who could still draw a tremendous audience internationally and could probably put $100 million in the bank without too much trouble, as astonishing as that may sound.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that he will have to raise at least $500 million to get completely out of debt. If you believe all the stories, the Wall Street Journal just did a story on him recently, and some say that his financial situation is even worse than the Wall Street Journal laid out. He lives in a world that we cannot imagine, Catherine. I have a couple of friends who have way lots more money than I do, but nobody near the magnitude of what Michael Jackson once was. $750 million, according, I think it was Forbes, who said he was worth $750 to $1 billion at one point in his life. And now, if the state is to be believed, he has nothing. When they talked about his worth here, they talked about the two catalogs, the Beatles and his own, the MyJack catalog, and Neverland. They didn't talk about annuities. They didn't talk about stock market investments or mutual funds. They didn't talk about anything else. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't maybe have something else. Maybe he has Swiss bank accounts somewhere that nobody knows about. But I think that he has just cleared a major hurdle in his life, and he's got more ahead.
Oh, boy. All right, Savannah, I understand you've got some info about the DA's presser?
Yeah, I think we're just moments away from it. What they're doing is letting the public in, the press who have credentials to attend this news conference, and once everybody's assembled there and seated, Tom Sneddon and his team will come in and face the cameras. And you know, it just reminds me as we think of and reflect on all these events, how all of the people, all of the parties in this case have had to try this case in front of a national and international audience. And so we're told that DA Tom Sneddon will be the first to face the cameras in just a couple of minutes from now.
All right, well, we'll certainly get right out there. We've got the room being watched at the moment. Jack, what do you think about Garagos's comment the other night on Larry King Live? He said that the celebrity factor worked very much in Michael's favor, even though I certainly agree with Jamie that this decision is not based on celebrity, but in fact that would be a major element in his favor.
I think it is because this is a different kind of case. You know, whenever jurors have to wrestle with these types of allegations, literally, they'll look at the defendant and say, does this look like the kind of person who would do this? Has he lived a life that would suggest that to us? When they look at Michael Jackson, I'm sure at some point in their deliberations, and we know that the defense said this to them, that they've got to think, well, why would a man like this, who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, jeopardize all of that. And they'll look at the arguments by the defense saying, why would he do it indeed after there was a spotlight shown upon in the Bashir documentary? Why would he do it then, after everybody was starting to look at him now? So in that sense, I think the celebrity, I'm sure, played into this because he's a different person that they understand and they know about. It's not some guy off of the street they've never seen, they've never heard, they don't know anything about. I think human nature being what it is, it's probably in many instances easier for you to believe ill of somebody who you don't know, have never seen before, and might even look like they're capable of doing bad things, than it is for you to believe ill of somebody who you've seen before, not doing bad things, but being an entertainer and inviting children to his Neverland ranch and being engaging and charming. So I think celebrity not in the strict sense of your name is out there, a famous person, but celebrity in who Michael Jackson was to them certainly has to have been some kind of factor here.
Yeah. Jamie, something else that bothered me, and I said several times during the course of this trial, the law, Jamie's awful. Let me come back then to Jack. The 1108 allows in all this prior conduct, but there was nothing between 93 and 2003, and that bothered me, or nothing they were able to bring in. That's a long window if pedophilia is what it's described to be, and that is something you do not grow out of.
Sure. We've said this before. If we're the defense attorneys in that courtroom, you say, all right, 93 allegations. The person himself didn't even come in and tell you about it. And now, 2003, if this person is a rampaging pedophile who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, don't you think somebody else would have shown up in between there, ready to get him to write a check for them too? If he had indeed accosted them the way the prosecution is saying that he plots this out, that he plans it out, that he grooms these people. I wish we could hear from these jurors, because I think it would be fascinating, not in the prurient sense, but in the legal sense, to find out what it is they felt was important here and what perhaps was missing in this case.
Diane, what about other instances? I know that we've got the 93, 94 cases that came in before this jury. You have all the Brent and Macaulay Culkin and others come in and say nothing happened, but were there other people, Diane, that they tried to get to come in that might have talked about instances, any instances that you're aware of between 93 and 2003?
No, not that I know of, not a soul. Now, I will tell you that a lot of that time, well, some of that time, a several two-year period or more, Michael Jackson traveled around the world. He was on the history tour, and I pulled that up and look at that. It was more than a year, maybe not quite 2 years, that he was out of this country. He was in Germany and Asia and Singapore and Thailand and other countries, and so, that there weren't any boys here in America during that period of time, I think it was 95, 96, I could understand. But even after that, 96 to 2003, there were no others that came forward. You're right.
All right, we've now got Tom Sneddon there. We're going to have a press conference from the district attorney's office. Let's listen in.
I guess I want to begin by turning the mic on.
It's on.
All right.
It's not actually a PA system.
All right, fine.
Folks, if you want to gather up closer so you can hear, there's not a PA system in the room. If you have any questions, please queue up at the mics here.
All right, first of all, I want to begin by saying that I'm very proud of our office. I'm proud of all the people that worked on this case. I'm particularly proud of Gordon and Ron, the team we put together, and the Sheriff's Department, which did, I think, an outstanding job of investigating this case and assisting us in putting on the evidence before the jury here. So that's the first thing I want to say. I guess the second thing I want to say is obviously we're disappointed in the verdict, but we work every day in a system of justice. We believe in the system of justice, and I've been a prosecutor for 37 years, and 37 years I've never quarreled with a jury's verdict, and I'm not going to start today. So basically, that's all we really have to say. I'll answer a few questions, but I'm probably not going to remain too long. So if anybody has a question far away,
I think we're going to start over
see
here.
how it goes.
Can you hear me okay?
I certainly can.
Right. Have you spoken with the accuser and his family, and if so, what was their mood and reaction to the verdict today?
No, as to all.
Can you address the defense's allegation throughout the trial that you rushed into this prosecution because of your past history with Mr. Jackson?
My past history of Mr. Jackson had absolutely, unequivocally, nothing to do with our evaluation of this particular case. That's been a nice little 30-second soundbite that the media has used to try to justify this thing, but it never had anything to do with either the sheriff's investigation or our decision to file.
Can you address the fans' claim that the Santa Barbara DA was somehow trying to frame Michael Jackson, and all of this really is an elaborate scheme to frame Michael Jackson and make him look guilty?
I just answered that question.
Mr. Sneddon, in retrospect, do you think you had the wrong family on the stand?
I don't know how much work you do in the criminal justice system, but the system I worked in for 37 years is that people come in and they're the victims of crime. We don't select our victims, and we don't select the families they come from. What we do is we evaluate the case. We try to make a conscientious decision as to whether or not we have enough evidence to go forward. And that's what we did in this case. We've done it in every other case since I've been the district attorney in this county, and we will continue to do that as long as I'm district attorney of this county.
You stand by what the family said in court?
I think that's evident.
There have been a lot of claims that because of the gag order you haven't been able to address. I mean, fans have, even Jackson's mother has said that you have some involvement with the Ku Klux Klan. Fans have claimed that you have relatives who are among the witnesses. Do you want to address any of those now that you finally can?
They're all false. We all did our job. We did it conscientiously. And anybody who knows Tom Sneddon, knows Gordon Auchincloss, and knows Ron Zonin, and the things that we've done in our community and the families that we have, knows all of that to be untrue. And if people would simply take the time to investigate the allegation before they print it, they'd know it's untrue also.
Have you looked into, and do you have concerns of reports that at least one of the jurors was peddling a book deal?
I had heard that.
You had heard that?
Yes.
And did you have concerns about that? And was it looked into?
Let's just say that it was taken care of by the court.
Would you reflect for just one moment on the conspiracy charge? Do you think that it might have been a better case without conspiracy, only child molestation?
I've learned a very expensive lesson in life a long time ago. That is, you never look back, you always look forward.
Tom, is this the end of your office pursuing Michael Jackson?
No comment.
What do you do now?
I don't think you want to know. I've been told not to crack any jokes, so we go back to work. We got a lot of cases that have been pending. I have an office to run. We're having budget hearings today. We're professionals, and we'll continue to act as professionals the way we act professionally in this case. And I'm not going to look back and apologize for anything we've done. We did a very conscientious, thorough job, as did the Sheriff's Department, in investigating this case.
Would you answer the question whether witnesses that you put on the stand surprised you when they testified?
I mean, I'm not going to get into the trial. I just say that the experience of any trial lawyer like Gordon or Ron or anybody in my office, for that matter, who tries felonies is you never have a case where a witness, you don't get some surprises on both sides in both ways. And I think Mr. Mesereau would tell you the same thing. And that's a product of being a trial lawyer, and you learn to adjust and you go on.
Why did you go ahead with the case when you knew the mother in particular to be such a troublesome witness?
I don't think the media generally understands the responsibility of a prosecutor. And I'll answer it this way, and the simple thing is, when a victim comes in and the victim tells you they've been victimized, and you believe that, and you believe that the evidence supports that, you don't look at their pedigree. We look at what we think is what's right. You do the right things for the right reasons. If it doesn't work out, that's why we have a jury system. But we did the right thing for the right reasons.
Do you have any problem with the judge reading the jury notes privately without releasing to the media last Friday and having that?
Listen, the judge is the judge. He has the prerogative to do and run his court the way he wants. I have no criticism of the judge.
Do you think that's constitutional and you don't have any problem with that?
You know, Greta, I just, you know, the judge has done what he's done, and that's the way we have to live with what, as you know, what the judge does. I have no criticism of the judge whatsoever, none.
Tom, if there were pivotal moments in the trial when you thought it was going one way or the other, what were they?
I didn't think there were any.
Mr. Sneddon?
I didn't. I just that the case
If you
went on.
If someone came to you now with strong allegations of molestation on the part of Michael Jackson, what would you do?
We'd review it like any other case we review in our office, just like we reviewed this one.
You wouldn't shy from it now?
Well, the answer to the question, truthfully, is I probably wouldn't if it was a good case. But I think we all learned some lessons here that we thought we had a good case this time. And we thought we did a conscientious job, and the Sheriff's Department did a remarkable job of investigating it. But no, the people in this county elected me to do a job, and I've tried to do that conscientiously. And I'll continue to do that the same way.
Child molester has escaped unpunished?
No comment. Okay?
Do you hope that Mr. Jackson leaves Santa Barbara County?
No comment.
Can I just ask, what was your assessment of the defense team and how they did in this trial?
I absolutely have no comment about that.
Do you have any estimate on the cost?
No.
You mentioned you'd learned some lessons. What lessons have you learned?
Well, I was referring probably more than anything else to the celebrity factor.
Can you elaborate?
I'm not the Lone Ranger in that faction.
Why does it take so long to try this case?
Actually, I thought the case went pretty fast, considering what the original estimates were. We were in trial for February, March, April, May.
So you don't think trials seem to take a little longer in California than...
Well, they definitely take a lot longer than they do in the South.
I'll give you that one.
Well.
Tom, when you walked into the courtroom, did you have an inkling what the verdict was?
No.
No?
We obviously had our aspirations, but certainly I had no inkling.
You mentioned the celebrity factor. Do you think that's played a key part?
Well, it seems to us, but maybe we're just looking for explanations in the wrong places. I don't know. Okay, any other questions? If you don't, we have some unfinished business. All right, thank you very much.
All right. Well, Diane, you have known this man for many, many, many years. I understand he's going to come down, I believe, and do an interview with you. Assess the press conference for us.
Well, I think it was very somber. It was very serious. He is a man who does crack jokes, even at tense times. And you notice he started to and said, oh, I've been told not to crack jokes. He is a jovial guy. He's a man's man. He plays golf and softball and basketball and baseball. And he's a real competitor. And I can tell by his demeanor there that this was a blow to him. But he's also a man who has a sense of duty. And his duty is that he's the district attorney of the county of Santa Barbara. And you heard him say there's lots of other cases to do, lots of other things, budgetary matters to handle and whatnot. So I don't really think of him, Catherine, as someone who dwells on things. I know. Everyone says, oh, he's dwelled on Michael Jackson all these years and he had a vendetta. But I never really believed that because I looked at his caseload from 1993 to 2003. And this was a man who was always in court. And he's the district attorney. You know, DAs usually dole out the cases to their underlings, but this is a man who really likes to be in the courtroom. He likes the competition. He likes the battle. And this one he lost.
All right, and is he going to come down and have a chat with you?
Well, I sure hope so, Catherine, unless someone has heard you say that and tries to waylay him on the way down here.
No.
I did get a message to him and from him that he would come and talk to Court TV, win or lose, big loss, but I do still expect him.
All right. Well, we will certainly be watching, and of course, our continuing coverage of the Jackson verdict continues on Court TV all night long. Stand by for Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom and Vinnie Politan, and I'll be back at 8 o'clock. Vinnie?
Thank you, Catherine. Another California case, another celebrity, another not guilty. An amazing verdict in California. Welcome to our continuing coverage of this Michael Jackson verdict. And if you haven't heard, folks, it's not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, all the way down, all 10 counts. And I'm sitting here with my partner, Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom. And Kimberly, The first one came out not guilty, like, okay, the conspiracy, not guilty. Let's see about the molestation. The first one was not guilty. And then no surprises after that once you hear those words, not guilty. But for me, really a surprising day that this jury agreed on everything, and they all agreed it was not guilty.
You're right about that. I think Catherine said it best earlier in the show when she said, look, we were all kind of waiting. She was waiting to hear what the rest of the evidence was, down to the last witness. That rebuttal video seemed to be powerful to the prosecution, them requesting the readback of the accuser, all powerful moments in that courtroom, and it makes you sit back and think what really was going through their mind the whole time. Again, a not guilty verdict. How do they really feel about all the evidence in the case? Do they think that he is in fact an innocent man, which is also a different thing?
Okay, let's go back out to Diane Diamond, who is still standing by. Diane, you know, this is a case where we heard Tom Sneddon talk about the celebrity factor. Do you think this is a case that kind of goes down in history as another celebrity that was found not guilty in a case in California?
Let's see, O.J. Simpson, Robert Blake, now Michael Jackson. I seem to see a little trend there, but it's spread over many years. Vinny, I need to tell you one quick update here. We've just heard from our producers, excuse me, that the jury will speak to the media. They will speak to the media, but only for 10 minutes. Now, next up, we expect Tom Mesereau and his team. I left the courtroom. I tried to watch as Michael Jackson was hustled into the automobile, and I don't think that Tom Mesereau got in with him. So I think that he will have a news conference next, and then we expect at least some of the jurors to come speak to the media, but again, for only 10 minutes.
Yeah, but that's going to be 10 incredible minutes, Kimberly, listening to what this jury was thinking. It's always fascinating to find out where was the focus and where did they find the reasonable doubt in this case. And in this case, it very well could have been the credibility of the accuser and his family.
Absolutely, and that's what, you and I talked about so much in this case. Perhaps they could have thought, yes, maybe something happened before in the past with the 93 accuser, with the son of the maid from Neverland, but that's not what he was on trial for. He was on trial for this case, these charges of alleged acts of molestation. The jury wholesale rejected the notion, obviously, that the accuser was telling the truth, and I think the mother, I suspect, had a lot to do with that. All
right, well, you're looking at our live pictures of those SUVs, which are presumably taking the defendant, Michael Jackson, and his family back to Neverland. Let's listen to this press conference.
Of lewd acts. The allegation claimed that entertainer Michael Jackson had engaged in these activities with the victim while a guest at the Neverland Ranch. Allegations of child abuse are taken seriously by this department. The allegation was carefully reviewed by the Sheriff's Department Criminal Investigations Division, and it was determined that the allegation merited further investigation. Child abuse, molestation, and other crimes against children are often the most difficult to investigate. The Sheriff's Department, as mandated by law and guided by a moral and ethical obligation to the child victim, has a duty to investigate these allegations. Our agency would be remiss if we did not investigate these types of allegations. Our duty is to protect the victims of abuse and ensure that the truth is found. It is equally important to exonerate the wrongly accused as it is to bring those involved in criminal behavior to justice. The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department is only one part of the criminal justice system. Our duty is to protect the life and the property of the public, investigate criminal activity, gather evidence, and present these findings to the district attorney. The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department and our employees have carried out this task with integrity, courage, and fairness. The Sheriff's Department presented its findings to the Santa Barbara County District Attorneys, to the Santa Barbara County District Attorney, and they in turn presented these findings to a criminal grand jury who indicted Michael Jackson. A jury of 12 decided the outcome of this trial. Using the standard of reasonable doubt, they rendered a verdict that was based on the facts and evidence and within the guidelines of the law. Mr. Jackson has been acquitted on all counts. The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department has closed the case on Mr. Jackson, and these allegations will no longer be investigated by this department. This case has had some impact on all members of the department. And as previously mentioned, our investigators have performed professionally throughout this entire investigation. I truly believe that they have done the best job possible under the circumstances of celebrity and international scrutiny. Law enforcement personnel are advocates for victims. no matter who the suspect is. The sheriff and I are extremely proud of our department personnel and their professional actions in this case. Thank you very much.
What you're seeing there is a live shot, Kimberly, as we're watching the SUVs go past this line of cars, people cheering for this man, Michael Jackson, who's been found not guilty.
With the cars, you see one man chasing part of the caravan down the street. You can imagine, as they are now getting so close to Neverland, the amount of well-wishers, supporters of Michael Jackson that have been camped out there for weeks to show their support for the reigning king of pop.
Yeah, and right now he's entering that Neverland Ranch. Savannah Guthrie is with us. Savannah, any idea what's going to take place tonight at Neverland Ranch?
I don't know, but you know, a lot of the fans are out there, and on past occasions they had been invited in for kind of a celebratory atmosphere. But I have to tell you, looking at Michael Jackson, even as he left, vindicated by this jury, he didn't seem like somebody who wanted to be partying or in any kind of a celebratory mood. He just walked out of the courthouse almost as somberly as he had walked in it just a few moments before. But there are a lot of fans there. The fans seem to have dissipated from this area. It's gotten to be very, very quiet here. They may be headed down to Neverland. As you see, it's about a 40-minute drive, and they may be just, you know, waiting outside there and have a party of their own right outside the gates.
Well, Savannah, I imagine that those closest to Michael Jackson have advised him that it would be unseemly, even though he has been acquitted of all charges, to show any kind of celebration or celebratory feel to this event. If he were to go outside and invite people in, it might be taken the wrong way, because Michael Jackson does have another battle ahead of him, and that is rebuilding his image, his reputation, and his career as he goes forward with a lot of the taint that was brought upon him in that courtroom with the evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not as if Michael Jackson has emerged unscathed from this trial. I mean, there have been a lot of very unflattering things that have been said about Michael Jackson, certainly some embarrassing and humiliating evidence offered in this courtroom in front of this jury, in front of his family, in front of his fans, in front of the national and international media. So for Michael Jackson, this was not an easy time, no matter how it turned out. And I agree with you that I don't think he's going to be jumping on top of any SUV, even if he were able to. Frankly, my sense of it is that he just seems shell-shocked, stunned by this whole turn of events. I mean, you know, imagine for all of us the anxiety and the anticipation waiting for that verdict, you know, triple it, quadruple it if you're the defendant sitting there in that chair and it's your life that hangs in the balance.
And there you see the SUVs getting very close to parking in front of the actual building where Michael Jackson will be walking in. A free man. He walked out of court a free man, walked into court a free man, but with such a burden there. And now this is it. Michael Jackson can put this behind him, and the question is, will the rest of the public let him put it behind him? And I think that's a question that's still up in the air, but there's a whole bunch of fans celebrating at Neverland today, so I think he's got a great chance to do that.
Well, and across the world as well. He has a tremendous fan base in Eastern Europe and in Asia where people are happy to buy his albums. I think the key is he does need to reinvent himself and come up with a great album, some great songs. We know that he'll be working with Frank DeLeo. Diane Dimond has reported that, someone who was with him with his biggest days in the Thriller days where he was a mega superstar. All right, we're going to go back to Savannah Guthrie. It's quite a scene there at Neverland with the fans obviously overjoyed at the return of their hero, of Michael Jackson. It did seem, though, he was having a little bit of a difficulty there at the courthouse today. Michael Jackson did appear kind of dazed and confused, Savannah.
Absolutely. You know, as I say, he seemed stunned, dazed, somber. You choose your adjective to describe him, but you know, the look was written all over his face. I should tell you that the jurors, I'm told, are assembling in the courtroom, getting ready for a news conference. I'm also told that all 20 of the jurors, so 12 jurors plus the 8 alternates, will participate in this news conference, but that they only expect to be there 10 minutes. Well, we've seen the press corps. We'll see about that, but in any event, that's the plan.
All right, as you watch that SUV pull up, Michael Jackson should be getting out of it. I don't know if he's in the first one or the second one, but the doors are opened and the picture's coming in and out. It's tough to get a picture out of Santa Barbara and Santa Maria, but you can see some folks getting out of there, and that's Michael Jackson and his family. This means so much to the entire Jackson family, Kimberly.
Absolutely.
Because this is a family that was under the microscope. You had Janet Jackson with her incident. We see an umbrella. I just assume that is Michael Jackson now going back into his home, back to his house where these allegations came out of, and now he's a free man putting it behind him. He's got a whole life to live, and the rest of his family there with him to support him.
Absolutely, and a little over an hour ago, he never knew if he was going to be able to come back to Neverland for the next, however, maybe even 18, 19 years. What a difference an hour makes. Here he is arriving back at his house. He's got a lot of troubles, health problems that he's besieged with his back, so we won't see any dancing, I imagine, on top of the SUV, and probably a lot to think about. And I'll tell you what, today Michael Jackson knows. He probably sits and reflects about who his real friends are and who was there to support him in his time of need.
Absolutely. You talk about painkillers, Kimberly. The greatest painkiller that Michael Jackson ever could have had was not guilty, and he got that today.
He got the acquittal.
He did. Savannah Guthrie, what's taking place at the courthouse now? Things quieting down, or is there still sort of that wave of excitement?
Well, there's still a lot of energy and electricity in the air. I can't lie to you, Vinny, but I do think the fans have really dissipated. If I had to guess, I'd say quite a number of them are headed to Neverland and probably want to wait out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of celebrating, as we saw in the video as Michael Jackson pulled in. The fans aren't afraid to celebrate, that much is clear. But as you say, I mean, a lot of the people have seemed to have disappeared out of the courthouse area. Now you see a lot of media who will be here all night, and I also see people taking some pictures. As I said, it's kind of over and over again. I keep getting the feeling like it's the end of the year, end of camp, end of a rock concert, people kind of trickling out with the energy just kind of draining out of this place.
All right, Savannah, we're going to go to Diane Diamond now, who has an exclusive interview with Thomas Sneddon, the prosecutor, something you only see on Court TV. Diane?
Yeah, Vinny. Tom Sneddon has graciously come to talk to us for a few minutes after this case is over and after the news conference you just saw him give. Mr. Sneddon, thanks a lot for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What did you think when you heard that not guilty, not guilty, not guilty over and over again?
Well, actually, after the second not guilty, we knew what the rest of them were, so sort of tuned out.
Yeah. I know you can't be happy with it. What are you with it? Are you defeated? Are you deflated? Are you mad?
No, disappointed. As I indicated in my press conference, you know, we don't argue with juries' verdicts. That's our job is to put the evidence on. I'm very proud of the job that was done by the members of my staff and by the Sheriff's Department. And we feel that we did an excellent job of representing the people of the state of California. So I'm not apologizing for anything. I think we did a good job, and the jury didn't see it that way. That's their prerogative.
What do you think the jury did see? Do you think they just had the reasonable doubt that Tom Mesereau talked about, or do you think maybe they found some fault with, say, this young accuser's mother? She was so controversial.
I don't know. It would be pure speculation to say how they arrived at their verdicts. They obviously, I mean, it's clear when you acquit on all 10 charges that credibility must have been a substantial issue of that jury.
I know you think a lot about children. You have 9 children of your own. You do a lot of child sexual abuse cases. What about the boy at the center of this case now? What happens to him?
Well, that's a difficult question in the sense that I think that, like everybody else who has been a survivor of this kind of thing, that they learn to adjust. I think he'll be hurt because, in the sense that his credibility, and he was very courageous in coming forward in the face of one of the world's most well-known celebrities. And it's like a David and Goliath story, except this time David didn't make it. And so I'm sure that he will feel some of that. I have not had a chance to talk to him yet, but I think I know him well enough to know that he will move forward and he will be a success in life. And he's gone through more in 15 years of life than most of us go through if we live to be 110. I mean, you don't go through the battles that he's been through with cancer and then this trial and all the stress and everything else that goes with it, and stepping up to the plate where a lot of people didn't step up to the plate. I think that tells you a measure of the young man, and I think that tells you a measure of how he will succeed in the face of future obstacles, and he'll do well.
You speak of him as a victim, yet the jury system doesn't really agree with that, do they?
Well, let's just put it this way. The jury obviously felt in their verdict that for whatever reason they didn't see it that way, but I would be less than candid if I told you that I didn't think that those of us associated with the case, the Sheriff's Department and the DA's office, believed this young man, or we wouldn't have been here. We believed in him, and for that reason, we felt that this case needed to be tried.
You know, when Tom Mesereau cross-examined that young man, you later said outside the presence of the jury to the judge that in his cross-examination of the accuser, he was as obnoxious and mean-spirited as you had ever seen. Tom Mesereau, your opinion of him today?
Oh,
I see that smile on your face. You're trying not to say something.
This is not a time to be talking of those kinds of things. You know, we were in trial, and people do things in trial and say things in trial. I don't mean to say that I didn't mean what I said to the judge, but I think that it's time to move on.
The judge in this case, you did not get in all the evidence you wanted. You didn't get a battered women's syndrome expert. You didn't get Ken Lanning, the FBI profiler, pedophile profiler, and to talk about the grooming books, the materials. Do you think that made a difference?
No.
No?
No. I really don't. And I have no criticism of the judge. It was a difficult trial for him, and he ran a tight ship, as the media well knows.
Yes, he did.
And he ran a tight ship with regard to the lawyers, and I don't think that anything that the judge said or did during the course of the trial in any way would have affected the outcome of the verdict.
We just saw some pictures as you were sitting down of Michael Jackson arriving back at Neverland in his entourage and all the fans lining the gates and the street to Neverland. Give us your opinion of this man. What kind of man is he in your estimation?
Well, Diane, I don't know that it would be appropriate for me to comment about Michael Jackson. I think we, as lawyers, do our talking in the courtroom. We put our evidence on. I think the evidence speaks for itself. And I don't think it's time for me to be talking about Mr. Jackson one way or the other.
How about a message to any families with young sons who may want to visit Neverland in the future? Do you have any advice for them?
No, I don't.
The 1993 accuser, he and his family got upwards of $20 million back in 1993. I know you talked to him during this investigation and I guess the trial. What did he have to say?
Well, I haven't talked to him recently, so...
Why didn't he want to come and testify?
I think you should probably ask him that question. I don't think...
Can I get his phone number from you?
I'm not the family spokesperson, and I'm not his spokesperson, and I think if that, you know, that's for somebody else, but my guess is he's probably thinking that whatever decision he made was probably the wise one, given what happened. I mean, if you look at somebody like Jason Francia, who testified, who's without any motive to do anything other than tell the truth, it obviously had no impact on the case or the jury's verdict in a case.
He was one of the 1108 witnesses, right?
That I think probably the victim from '93 saying that he made a good decision. In '93 and then now.
goes back to what you were saying at that news conference. You learned some lessons about the power of celebrity. Is that what you mean?
I guess that's what I mean. You tend to think that, you tend to hope that the celebrity status of an individual does not become either a hammer or a shield in a case. And yet, putting aside this trial, the lessons of America is, American trials, is that it is a factor. And all you can do as a prosecutor who is given the responsibility of representing your community is to do what you think is correct based on the evidence and the testimony and the investigation and the believability of the victim, and do what's right for the right reasons. And if something doesn't work out the way that you think it should work out, that's part of the system. But that doesn't mean you don't do your job because you're afraid that somebody's a celebrity or somebody can buy their way out of something. I mean, all I know is that there are a lot of people who have come up to me and said to me, I'm very grateful for what you're doing, no matter what happens. This has been over the months. and that you're not allowing somebody with a lot of money to influence your decision to do what was right. And I just say that that's the way we operated in this case. So I have no apologies for what we did. I feel very strongly that we did the right thing for the right reasons. We had the right lawyers on the case. I was very blessed to be with two fine prosecutors like Gordon and Ron, and I have no apologies to make for what we did. I think we worked our tail off, and I think we did a good job of presenting the evidence. That's a simple way it is.
Do you think Michael Jackson got a fair trial, or do you think Michael Jackson got more than a fair trial?
No, I'm not going to bite into that one.
Okay, how about this one? Unindicted co-conspirators. There were at least 5, maybe as many as 8, according to your state papers. Any trials, any upcoming indictments, does all that just go away, or do you pursue them?
Well, Diane, I learned a long time ago you don't make a decision about something important at least for 48 or 72 hours until the dust is settled, so I wouldn't have any comment about that right now.
Can I talk about you for a minute? You have been a DA how long?
I've been a DA 37 years.
And how many?
Deputy. I've been a prosecutor for 37 years. I've been DA for 22 years.
And how many cases have you lost before today?
Well, only 4.
Now it's 5.
Now it's 5. I guess I'm going out with a whimper rather than a bang.
You have had a long career, many of them child sexual abuse cases, but this is going to be your legacy, isn't it?
I hope not. I think the people, it may be in the media, but the media doesn't have a legacy. You move on to the next story next week, so there's not a lot of legacy there. In terms of this community, in this county where I've worked for 37 years, no, I don't think that's my legacy. My legacy is we have one of the finest prosecuting offices in the state of California. I have outstanding staff. We have dedicated investigators and support staff, and you know, we win most all our cases, and we lost this one. That's the way it is. It's a big one. I'm not gonna shy away from that. But the fact of the matter is, last Friday we won a death penalty. We won a case, a very, very difficult murder case, where they're now into the penalty phase. And Monday before that, we won a case, a sexual assault case in Santa Barbara, where the defendant's now facing a life sentence for multiple offenses. So we do a lot of very important work in this county, and no, I don't think this is my legacy. But if it, so be it. I mean, I'm comfortable with that.
I noticed as you walked over here from the courthouse, which is directly behind me, you had, well, Lieutenant Jeff Klopakis, you had the lead detective Steve Robel, you had another bodyguard with you. Talk to me about your safety during this time, because there have been a lot of threats toward you, haven't there?
Well, let's just put it this way. The threat factor probably just got inflated by the jury's verdict, so I'm not as concerned about it as I would have been.
Or got deflated, you mean?
Well, deflated, yeah. Did I say inflated? No, deflated. This is the correct word.
Wasn't it true that at one time you were thinking about carrying a gun, or was carrying a gun during the investigation part?
Well, I think I could put it this way, in a way that you would understand it, since you've had some difficulties, I understand, from reading in the paper, that much of what I saw in '93 and '94, I saw again this time, and it is clearly